Story 1. Jonathan was born in Michigan in 1994 to Jennifer and Michael. 3 years later, his sister Jessica came into his life. From a very young age, Jonathan and Jessica formed a bond that's unbreakable. They shared a special connection. Unfortunately, Jonathan's parents, Jennifer and Michael, faced struggles. Their frequent fights meant Jonathan and Jessica were often left in the care of their grandmother, Sandra. Sandra was Jennifer's mother and took the role of a nurturing caregiver to her grandchildren. She provided Jonathan and Jessica with a safe and loving home away from home. At their grandmother's house, Jonathan and Jessica found solace and comfort. Sandra brought joy and laughter, and the children cherished the moments they spent with her. She was married to Fred Lane. Together, Sandra and Fred created a family unit that nurtured and protected Jonathan and Jessica. In 2008, after enduring years of turmoil, Jennifer and Michael divorced. When Jonathan was a Central High School senior, he faced a challenging and unexpected turn of events. His mother made the decision to move the family from Michigan to Arizona. The move was difficult for him, as he was leaving behind the only life he had ever known. The situation only worsened for Jonathan and his family when they arrived in Arizona. Shortly after their relocation, his young sister Jessica became gravely ill. After undergoing extensive tests and examinations, doctors discovered a tumor on Jessica's brain. Jessica's diagnosis was devastating for the entire family. Jessica underwent surgery the very next day to remove the tumor. The operation was successful, but it came at a cost. She endured a lengthy recovery, requiring her to stay in the hospital for a whole month. During this time, Jennifer devoted all her time and attention to her daughter's well-being, sacrificing her own needs, which left Jonathan feeling isolated and alone. He had to cope with the pressure of being a teenager in a new state while facing the absence of his mother and sister. Recognizing the strain that Jonathan was going through, Sandra, his grandmother, reached out to Jennifer. Deeply concerned about her grandson's well-being, Sandra suggested sending him north to Michigan to live with her and her husband, Fred. She believed that being around familiar surroundings and old friends would provide Jonathan with some solace during this difficult time. Jonathan was a good kid, but he still possessed the youthful energy and unpredictability that comes with being a teenaged boy. Jennifer worried whether her 74-year-old mother Sandra would be capable of caring for him. However, Sandra reassured Jennifer that she was more than capable of taking care of him. 1 month after the Hoffman family moved to Arizona, Jonathan returned to Michigan and moved in with his grandmother Sandra and her husband Fred. This homecoming brought joy and relief to Jonathan, who was midway through his senior year at high school. He was thrilled to be back among his friends and family, feeling a sense of comfort and belonging he had missed while away. Jonathan's friends agreed that he was shy at first, but when he opened up, he was a lot of fun and loved to make people laugh. He had a zest for adventure and was always up for trying new things. When he returned to Michigan and Farmington Central High School, his friends were thrilled to have him back. Jennifer, his mother, missed her son greatly and made the trip to Michigan to visit him for 2 weeks. Despite Jonathan's apparent happiness living with his grandmother, Jennifer discovered that he had been smoking cannabis. However, Jonathan's dabbling in illegal substances did not extend to harder drugs. Although Jennifer was not happy about his cannabis use, she considered this typical teenage experimentation. It was difficult for Jennifer to return home after her trip with her son. With a heavy heart, Jennifer bid farewell to Jonathan, feeling confident that he would be in good hands. As Jennifer made her way back to Arizona, her mind filled with thoughts of her son's well-being. She reassured herself that her mother would never allow any harm to Jonathan, her grandchild. However, Jennifer could not have been more wrong. Little did Jennifer know that Jonathan was in grave danger, and it was at the hands of his grandmother Sandra. In a matter of weeks, Jonathan would be dead. On May 19, 2017, at 5:27 p.m., Jonathan Hoffman made the panicked call to 911. His voice trembling as he relayed to the dispatcher that his grandmother had shot him and he was dying. The dispatcher quickly sprang into action, dispatching police and paramedics to Jonathan's residence. As she spoke to him, she tried to reassure him that help was on the way, her voice steady amongst the chaos and fear in his voice. There was an ominous silence on the line, and for a moment, the dispatcher feared that the connection had been dropped or that Jonathan had passed away. But then, just as her heart sank, she heard a barrage of gunfire erupt from the phone, followed by a pained cry. Jonathan shouted, "Ow!" as his voice cracked with terror as he told the operator that his grandmother had shot him again. The West Bloomfield Township Police Department officers were swiftly dispatched to the scene, arriving at Sandra Lane's house at 5:33 p.m. As they approached, they could hear gunfire coming from within the residence. The officers, trained to handle such situations, didn't hesitate to take the necessary precautions. They positioned themselves behind their patrol vehicles, providing cover for themselves. From their position, the officers observed a woman walking inside the house. They issued clear commands ordering the person inside to place their weapon on the ground. Time seemed to stand still, their hearts pounding with anticipation. Finally, after a tense moment, the officers heard the sound of a gun being secured. With the assurance that the person inside had secured the firearm, they decided to enter the residence. When the police made it inside the home, they found 74-year-old Sandra Lane standing in front of them, a Glock 17.40 caliber handgun at her feet. Staring at the police, Sandra said, "I murdered my grandson several times." Sandra was not crying. She was calm and stated the disturbing sentiment as a matter of fact. One of the police officers asked Sandra why she killed her grandson, but Sandra remained silent. 2 minutes after the police arrived at her home, Sandra was handcuffed and placed in the back of a patrol vehicle. Officers entered her home to find the victim, who Sandra said was her grandson, 17-year-old Jonathan Hoffman. Inside Sandra Lynn's home, the air was heavy with smoke, making it difficult to see through the haze. As they climbed the staircase, they reached the landing where Jonathan lay motionless, face down on the hardwood floor. Dressed in gym shorts and socks, the young man's body was riddled with gunshot wounds to his upper torso. Despite the severity of his condition, the medics managed to detect a faint pulse. With urgency, Jonathan was rushed to Botsford Hospital, where a team of medical professionals worked tirelessly to stabilize his condition. However, their efforts proved futile, and after 30 minutes of intense medical intervention, he was pronounced dead. After the ambulance rushed Jonathan Hoffman to the hospital, Sandra Lane's home was secured as a crime scene. The residence spanned 3 levels, and nearly every room was filled with signs of violence and blood. Crime scene investigators arrived and carefully examined the area, searching for clues that could shed light on the shocking events. As investigators descended the basement staircase, they were immediately struck by the presence of footprints and bloodstains on the ground. The investigators carefully preserved this evidence. Moving further into the house, the team came across 10 bullet casings scattered in various areas. Each casing was collected. One of the investigators noticed a bullet hole in the drywall. In the search for more evidence, the investigators made their way to the second floor. There they discovered a gun case filled with ammunition. While the investigators were busy collecting evidence, they took special care to photograph Sandra, her face, arms, and hands. While sitting in the back of the patrol car, Sandra became very upset and started to cry. In the middle of the chaos, Fred Lane, Sandra's husband, showed up outside of the house with their dog. According to Fred, he had been gone for an hour, having taken the dog for a walk after Sandra asked him to. Fred was stunned to learn that his wife had admitted to shooting and killing their grandson Jonathan. Once Jonathan was pronounced dead at the hospital, the police faced the challenging task of informing his family that their beloved son was murdered by his grandmother, Sandra Lane. As detectives delved deeper into the case, they learned that Jonathan had been living in Michigan while his parents and sister were residing in Arizona. When the detectives broke the devastating news to Jennifer, informing her that her mother had shot and killed her beloved son, she was left in a state of stunned disbelief. It seemed inconceivable that someone who was supposed to love and cherish their grandchildren could commit such a heinous crime. Everyone knew that Jonathan was his grandmother's favorite, which made it even more unfathomable how he ended up dead at Sandra's hands. As the day wore on, around 7:30 p.m., the police decided to take Sandra Lane to the hospital for a health evaluation, given her advanced age. As they waited in the emergency room, Sandra insisted that Jonathan had never hurt her. She described him as a good boy who never harmed anyone. After a medical assessment, the doctors cleared Sandra of any suspicious injuries. With this, the police decided to place her back into the patrol car and take her to the police department for questioning. On May 20th, after midnight, Sandra's attorney met her at the police station. Before she provided her official statement to the police, Sandra sought legal advice from her attorney. When the detectives eventually met with Sandra and her attorney, Sandra's story dramatically changed. At the hospital, she had initially told police that her grandson was not involved in the incident. However, during their meeting at the police station, she claimed that Jonathan and she were engaged in an altercation which involved yelling and screaming. During this altercation, Jonathan kicked her in the stomach, causing her to fear for her life. According to Sandra, Jonathan had been exhibiting strange behavior and signs of anger lately. Jonathan had been coming and going from her house at all hours of the night, and he often brought people over whom she did not particularly care for. Furthermore, Sandra had noticed valuables missing from her home, leading her to suspect that Jonathan or his friends may have been involved in theft. Sandra also mentioned that her grandson has a history of getting into trouble with the law. Sandra claimed while Jonathan was driving, an officer pulled him over and it was discovered that there was cannabis in his car. However, that did not deter him from engaging in similar behavior. Just a short time later, Jonathan was again stopped by an officer, and this time it was discovered that he was in possession of Adderall. In addition to the aforementioned incidents, Sandra also recounted a time when she had to call 911 due to Jonathan's aggressive behavior. During that particular incident, Jonathan was yelling obscene things at her. However, when the police arrived, Sandra implored them not to arrest Jonathan. According to Sandra, she only purchased a gun because of Jonathan's behavior. Sandra claimed that everything came to a head on May 18th, after she took Jonathan to the probation department because he had not been in compliance with his probation. When they returned home, Sandra said Jonathan threatened to take her car, and that is when he attacked her. Since there were no witnesses to Jonathan's shooting other than Sandra, the detectives faced a challenge in confirming her story. Sandra claimed self-defense, making the detectives conduct an investigation into what happened. They needed to ensure they were not sending a 74-year-old frail grandma to prison for defending herself against a violent teenage boy. The detectives reviewed the picture taken by the crime scene investigators immediately after Sandra admitted to shooting Jonathan. However, the detectives did not find any signs of violence on Sandra. Not a single scratch was present, which would be expected if she had been in a struggle. During her court arraignment, the judge ruled that Sandra should be held with bond as she awaited trial at the Huron Correctional Facility. Paul Walton, the prosecutor assigned to the case, felt that the 911 call made by Jonathan contradicted Sandra's claim of self-defense. When Paul listened to the call, he noticed a significant period, approximately 2 minutes and 51 seconds, of silence before Sandra fired another shot at Jonathan. Based on Walton's observations, it seemed that Jonathan was already severely injured and posed no immediate threat to Sandra. However, Sandra's defense attorney presented a different argument. They contended that Jonathan was still a threat despite his injuries. The defense highlighted a portion of the 911 call where Sandra is heard yelling, "Let go," during the altercation, suggesting that Jonathan was still coming for his grandmother, even though he was injured. The defense attorneys for Sandra Lane argued that she was nothing more than an innocent and loving grandmother. They argued that the end of the 911 call, where Sandra can be heard saying to a grandson who was bleeding out to lie down and that she was going to get him some water, proved that point. According to the defense, these statements showed Sandra's true nature as a compassionate and caring woman. Prosecutor Walton was confused by Sandra Lane. Was she a loving grandmother who had no alternative but to take the life of her grandson in a tragic circumstance? Or was she a cold-blooded murderer who pursued her grandson, ultimately shooting him like an animal in the woods? To gain a deeper understanding of Sandra Lane, Prosecutor Walton initiated a series of interviews around town. These testimonies, all of who were interviewed, painted a consistent picture of Sandra as an ordinary grandmother. Sandra frequented the local salon weekly, actively participated in her synagogue, taught Sunday school, and volunteered her time. She was also known for her generosity and affluence. What struck the detectives most was the overwhelmingly positive feedback from those who knew Sandra. They described her as deeply bonded to her grandchildren, especially Jonathan. The testimonies seemed to contradict the horrific act she had admitted to committing. However, a different story emerged when the detectives interviewed Jennifer, Sandra's daughter, and Jonathan's mother. Jennifer provided a different take on her mother's character, contradicting the image presented by the community. Jennifer claimed that her mother was not the warm and compassionate person portrayed by others. Instead, she painted a different picture, describing her mother as a controlling and abusive person. According to Jennifer, when she grew up, her parents constantly fought, and there were times when Sandra physically assaulted her. Jennifer stated that her father was often absent, leaving her mother complete control over the household. As a result, Sandra acted like a tyrant going on tirades. Eventually, Sandra said her father went on one trip and never returned. Several years after her father's disappearance, Sandra remarried a man named Fred Lane. Jennifer noticed a significant change in her mother's behavior. Sandra expressed a deep love for Fred and believed that he was a good man who brought stability to their home. Initially, Sandra's arguing and controlling behavior seemed to subside. However, Jennifer claimed that after she gave birth to her first child, Jonathan, Sandra once again tried to impose her control. According to Jennifer, her mother, Sandra, became obsessed with her baby, to such an extent that Jennifer often joked that she thought Sandra wanted to kidnap the baby and take him away from her. Jennifer believed that Sandra's obsession bordered on an unhealthy level. After Sandra was charged with murdering her grandson, Jonathan, the community of West Bloomfield rallied around her. There were a significant number of residents who believed that Jonathan was a drug user who deserved to be killed. In response to this sentiment, members of the community began posting supportive messages on social media, expressing their encouragement for Sandra, referring to her as Granny, and using the hashtag #GoGrannyGo. To the public, Jonathan was portrayed as a monster, while Sandra was depicted as an innocent and frail older woman. Jennifer shared that most of her family had accepted Sandra's self-defense narrative and had turned their backs on the memory of both Jonathan and herself. Sandra's husband, Fred, stood by his wife's side throughout the ordeal, offering unwavering support. The medical examiner determined Jonathan Hoffman's manner of death to be homicide. Jonathan's cause of death was the multiple gunshot wounds he sustained. Examination of the wounds revealed the presence of stippling, which indicated that the gun was fired at Jonathan from varying distances. In addition to the gunshot wounds, a toxicology report was conducted on Jonathan's body. The report revealed the presence of synthetic marijuana, also known as spice. At the time, spice, specifically K2, was prevalent among teens and young adults in West Bloomfield. This substance could be purchased at gas stations without identification, and there were several reports of individuals taking it and experiencing adverse reactions, such as violent behavior. Interestingly, 1 month before Jonathan's death, there was a murder involving another student from the same high school. Michael Cipriano, a student like Jonathan, murdered his father Robert following a verbal confrontation. It was reported that Michael was under the influence of spice at the time of the attack. Jessica, Jonathan's sister, had a deep love for her brother, but she was aware of his emotional and sometimes violent tendencies. Despite not wanting to think about it, she began to wonder if her brother had hurt their grandmother, which is why she shot and killed him. 2 months after Sandra was arrested at a circuit court arraignment, she was indicted on 2 more charges: possession of a firearm and the commission of a felony, and a unique indictment called open murder. Open murder is only in effect in select states, including Nevada and Michigan. It encompasses both first and second-degree murder charges. Prosecutor Paul Walton was concerned about the jury's potential reluctance to convict a grandmother of premeditated murder. As a result, he decided to present the jury with a broader range of options, a decision that displeased the defense. They felt that the prosecution was copping out on their job. In 2013, Sandra Lane went on trial for the murder of her grandson. News of the killing spread, garnering national attention. Many people blamed Jennifer, Jonathan's mother, for allegedly sending him with Sandra to Michigan. There were those who posted on social media criticizing Jennifer and suggesting her son deserved to die, along with Jennifer herself. During the trial, Sandra Lane's defense attorneys focused on portraying her as an innocent and loving grandmother. However, the state put forth a contradicting argument. Attempting to disprove her claims of self-defense, Prosecutor Walton presented the jury with the images taken after the shooting, which depicted Sandra. He argued that these images indicated inconsistencies in her account of the altercation. One of the notable discrepancies pointed out by Prosecutor Walton was that Sandra's clothes were not ripped, her jewelry was not torn off, and her glasses were still fixed in place. Additionally, her hair remained styled. This evidence implied that there was no physical struggle between Sandra and Jonathan, as she had claimed. Additionally, there was evidence to support the theory that Sandra went down to the basement after the shooting to find additional ammunition. This evidence was shown in the bloody footprints the investigators found on the basement stairs. The crime lab determined the footprints belonged to Sandra, and the blood they were made in was Jonathan. After the prosecution rested their case, Sandra's defense had the opportunity to present their case. In order to strengthen their case, Sandra's attorney decided to allow her to testify on her behalf. Despite the risk involved, the attorney believed that it was important for the jury to hear directly from Sandra herself about the experiences she faced while living with her grandson Jonathan in the months before he was killed. According to Sandra, Jonathan was violent and had a habit of kicking in doors and breaking objects. One time, he even shattered a computer monitor. On the day of the incident that led to Jonathan's death, Sandra claimed that he hit her in the head, which left her feeling threatened and afraid. As a result, she decided to retrieve her gun, hoping it would serve as a means to protect herself. Her intention, according to her testimony, was not to kill her grandson, but rather to stop him from getting back up and attacking her again. However, during cross-examination by Prosecutor Paul Walton, Sandra's defense began to crumble. When pressed by Walton, Sandra admitted that her motive for obtaining the gun was not fear for her safety, but rather wanting Jonathan to listen to her. This admission weakened her credibility as a witness and made it more difficult to argue self-defense. Experts testified that the K2 spice detected in Jonathan's urine at the time of his death indicated he was not actively under the influence of the drug during the time of his death. The location in the urine suggested that the drug had gone through his system, dismissing Sandra's claim that Jonathan was high on the drug and violent. Following the presentation of the evidence presented at the trial, the jury deliberated for 2 days before returning with a guilty verdict for second-degree murder and use of a firearm during the commission of a felony. Sandra was sentenced to 20 years of imprisonment. Story 2. In a world where children should feel safe and loved by their parents, something terrible happened. On June 15, 2023, the lives of 3 young boys, 4-year-old Hunter, 7-year-old Clayton, and 3-year-old Chase were tragically cut short. The culprit behind this heartbreaking incident was their 32-year-old father, Chad Dorman, who shocked the nation with his involvement in his own children's deaths. From the brutal act of taking their children's lives to later sitting calmly on the porch, each moment unfolds a chilling narrative of horror. In the quiet town of Monroe, Ohio, a father's love turned into a twisted act of violence on June 15, 2023. 3 young boys were senselessly killed and left their mother and community in a state of shock and disbelief. Chad Dorman, the father, was charged with this horrific crime. Initially, he confessed to his actions, but later he pleaded not guilty, adding to the mystery surrounding his motive and involvement. As the investigation proceeded, disturbing details about the incident emerged, painting a chilling picture of a father's descent into unthinkable cruelty. As the legal proceedings continued, the world watches anxiously, hoping for justice for the innocent lives lost and searching for answers to the haunting question: what could drive a father to commit such a horrific crime against his own children? Chad Christopher Dorman, a 32-year-old from Claremont County, Ohio, was married to 34-year-old Laura. They have a teenage stepdaughter named Alexis, who was 16 years old. Chad and Laura also had 3 young sons together, aged 3, 4, and 7, named Hunter, Clayton, and Chase, who always stayed together and loved sports. They were funny and sweet boys. Laura, their mom, stayed at home while Chad worked to support the family. They lived in a simple 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom house in New Richmond, a small town of about 2,800 people along the Ohio River in Claremont County. They were an ordinary family until tragedy struck. So, on June 15, 2023, Chad came home from work a bit earlier than usual. He then decided to take a nap with his family, so he invited his wife Laura and their 3 sons to join him in their bedroom. They all sat together and were having a good time, laughing and chatting. But little did Laura know that those moments of happiness would soon turn into unimaginable horror. After a few minutes of chatting and laughing, Chad got up and opened the gun safe, which was right next to their bed. He took the Marlin Model HC-22 rifle, loaded the magazine, and shot his 4-year-old son Hunter twice. His daughter Alexis was watching television in the family room when she heard the sound of a gunshot. She hurried to the primary bedroom to see what had happened. As she reached the doorway, she witnessed the horrifying sight of her brother being shot. Alexis was terrified. She turned and ran as fast as she could. Laura, who was with her kids, ran to provide aid to her child Hunter. She then shouted at the other kids to run and save their lives. Alexis noticed the oldest boy running out the wrong door toward a field. She shouted for him to keep running. Chad was following him, and within moments, he shot his 7-year-old son Clayton. After Clayton fell to the ground and was bleeding badly, Chad stood next to him as if he had achieved his goals. Alexis was witnessing all of that. She was horrified, and then she ran to the house, grabbed her youngest brother, and fled to safety, desperate to protect their lives. Chad ran towards Alexis and caught her and raised his gun and asked her to put the 3-year-old Chase down. Alexis cried and pleaded with Chad not to shoot her and also begged him to stop. Chad tried to shoot her in the head, but luckily he ran out of bullets. At that moment, Alexis ran to the fire station where she urgently stopped a woman who was passing by her house. She told the woman that her stepfather killed all her family. The woman then called 911 at 4:15 p.m. Meanwhile, 3-year-old Chase returned to his mother. Suddenly, Chad and Laura started arguing over Chase. Chad tried to pull Chase out of Laura's arms, but she was holding onto him tightly, trying to protect him. Shockingly, Chad then bit Laura and then pressed the gun against her thumb and fired. Laura dropped Chase because she was wounded badly. Chad then shot Chase in the head and later arranged the lifeless bodies of all 3 children in a line. After killing all 3 of them, he sat calmly on his front porch, acting like nothing happened. While Laura was inside the house, she was continuously shouting for help. After the 911 call, the police arrived at the scene at 4:25 p.m. When police arrived, Chad was sitting on the porch of his house with a rifle beside him. The police officers quickly caught him and placed him in handcuffs. Chad appeared calm and did not resist being restrained. While one officer controlled him, the other attended to the 3 victims. Paramedics tried to save the children, but unfortunately they all died from their gunshot injuries. Later, Laura was taken to the University of Cincinnati Medical Center for her injuries. Chad Dorman's stepdaughter Alexis was lucky to have survived the shooting. She had managed to escape from the house. On the same day that he killed his 3 sons, June 15, 2023, Chad was when the police officers caught him. He was surprisingly calm and polite, behaving as though nothing had happened. Later, he was taken to jail for more questioning, and during the interrogation, Chad Dorman admitted to police that he had been planning the killings since October 2022. Chad also confessed to the investigators that he hadn't slept for 3 to 4 days because the thought of killing his own sons was unbearable. These revelations painted a disturbing picture of his state of mind leading up to the tragic events. The investigation continued and investigators explored whether Chad had a history of general violence. They also checked his phone records. Upon reviewing the records, it was also found that he mainly had traffic violations in Claremont County, with the exception of one incident when he was 18 involving criminal damage. Additionally, there was a domestic violence case in 2010 where he was accused of choking his father, Keith Dorman. Later, the case was dropped when Keith Dorman failed to appear in court to testify for the prosecution. These records provided insight into Chad's legal history and past interactions with law enforcement in the county. As the investigation was going on, one of the neighbors, Richard Kincannon, told a news channel he was angry every day. There wasn't a day he didn't yell at his wife and kids out there. He was very angry. Every day yelling at his wife, dogging her, downgrading the kids. Just very angry. And if they didn't do what he said, and I've seen it firsthand, but I never thought that he would do that. The woman who called 911 also gave an interview to the news channel and said, she was running with a little black lab and she was screaming, "Call 911, call 911. She says, "My stepfather is shooting everyone in my household." Investigators also examined whether there were any signs of financial difficulties. They found out from the county auditor's website that Dorman purchased his converted manufactured home on 3 acres in 2016 for $75,000. According to the records, he paid property taxes up to 2023, indicating there were no obvious issues with mortgage payments. Detectives also interviewed 59-year-old Keith Dorman, Chad's father. He was in utter shock to hear what his child did. He told the investigators, "I'm still trying to comprehend." Keith Dorman said that he couldn't believe his child had done something so horrible. He even said, There was something going on in his life that he couldn't handle anymore. I can't talk to him. They aren't letting me talk to him, so I don't have any answers. He probably hid a lot of stuff from me. His father tearfully described him as a good kid, expressing deep distress over the situation. He said, I don't know if it was financial, I don't know if it was mental, I don't know if it was work-related, I don't know. He even described his son as a fun-loving guy, and emphasized his son had never been in trouble with the law. His father's statement was somewhat misleading, as his son had encountered legal issues in the past. Although both cases were dismissed for reasons that remain unclear, the community was deeply shaken by the news of the killings. Neighbors expressed surprise, saying they never expected such actions from Chad. He had presented himself as a great and caring father on social media and in conversations with neighbors, and they said they were not looking for any other suspects. They focused their investigation solely on Chad Dorman, aiming to uncover the motives and details surrounding the tragic incident involving his children. During interrogation, Chad initially pleaded guilty and confessed to everything he had done. However, during the first court hearing on June 23, 2023, he maintained his innocence and entered a plea of not guilty to the charges against him. Later, during his court hearing on Friday, June 23rd, Chad looked very upset. He wore a green bulletproof vest and cried while prosecutors talked about the terrible events that happened on June 15th. During the hearing, David Gast, the chief prosecutor of municipal court in Claremont County, shared disturbing details about the case. He stated that Chad had carefully planned the events. He revealed that one of Chad's sons had tried to run away from him in a nearby field, but Chad had chased and caught the boy and brought him back to the yard, where he was killed along with his brothers. Gast even said he called Chad's killings of his sons one of the most monstrous, craven, cowardly acts that will ever be our misfortune of seeing. A bill of particulars that was filed in Claremont County provided all the information to the judge. All the incidents that happened were read aloud by the prosecutor. According to the prosecutor, Chad lined up the boys and shot them, and even Chad told the investigators that he had planned the killings. The prosecutor said when their mother tried to stop him, she was also shot in the hand. The prosecutor said that the father, Chad, shot 9 times, causing immense harm. One boy was hit once, while the other 2 were each shot 4 times. The prosecutor, Mark Teklov, told the judge how cruelly Chad killed his 3 sons. He said the brutal act left the family and community in a state of shock. Not only this, the prosecutor also said that Chad even confessed to the murder and said, "I did it. Take me to jail. I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have shot them." Prosecutor Mark Teklov also told the judge that Chad pleaded guilty during the interrogation, so he wanted the death penalty for him. The prosecutor in this case, Mark Teklov, has made it clear he will not settle for anything less than having Chad Dorman executed. After the court hearing, Teklov said to one of the news channels, "This is by far the most sickening, horrifying crime I have seen. I can only imagine the terror that these little boys felt and experienced as their father, their protector, was murdering them. We will do our utmost within my office to see this defendant never see the light of day again. First and foremost, I want to start out by expressing the deepest sympathy I have for this family, for this unspeakable tragedy. I can't go into a whole lot of comics because this is a death penalty case, and my goal is to have this man executed for slaughtering these 3 little boys." Teklov said that his goal is to have this man executed for slaughtering these 3 young boys. It was an incomprehensible act of horror that he perpetuated on the family. Initially, Chad faced a total of 21 charges related to the tragic events that unfolded on June 15, 2023. Specifically, he was accused of shooting and killing 3 young children, including 4-year-old Hunter, 7-year-old Clayton, and 3-year-old Chase, in an execution-style manner. What's more, now a grand jury has indicted Dorman on 21 counts, including 9 counts of aggravated murder, 8 counts of kidnapping, and 4 counts of felonious assault. Now, he could potentially face the death penalty if he's convicted on these charges. Initially, charges against him included 9 counts of aggravated murder, 8 counts of kidnapping, and 4 counts of felonious assault. These serious charges reflect the severity of the allegations against Chad Dorman in connection with the tragic deaths of his children. The Claremont County Municipal Court Judge, Jason Nagel, decided that Chad should be kept in the Claremont County Jail and set his bail at $20 million. At this point in time, bonds are going to be set in the amount of $20 million cash or surety. Anything else at this time, Mr. Gaston? No, Judge. Mr. Callum. Mr. Callum, anything further? Nothing at this time. Chad Dorman's bond, which was set at $20 million, was reportedly the highest bond ever set in the county's history. During another court hearing, Chad Dorman's lawyer requested the court to take the death penalty off the table because he said Chad was suffering from a serious mental illness when he shot and killed his 3 sons on June 15, 2023. Guilty by reason of insanity, Chad Dorman has entered a new plea now, more than 9 months after Claremont County prosecutors say he executed his 3 young sons. Experts will also be taking another look now at Dorman's mental state at the time of the killing. Chad's lawyer even said, "Executing the seriously mentally ill is cruel and unusual punishment in violation of both the Ohio and United States Constitutions. Persons suffering from serious mental illness at the time of the alleged commission of the offense are not morally culpable to the same extent as others." Dorman has entered a plea of not guilty by reason of insanity. The prosecution, though, has requested a mental evaluation. Later, a court date was set for May 3, 2024 to discuss the lawyer's request. Chad's lawyers had agreed to provide a report from a mental health expert by June 3, 2024 to support their claim that he was mentally ill when the crime occurred. During another court hearing in March 2024, Chad's lawyers argued in court that the Claremont County Sheriff's deputies did not respect his Miranda rights after he was arrested. A judge has ruled that Chad Dorman's confession that he allegedly gave during his interrogation will be thrown out. On Friday, the judge ruled that the defendant's rights were violated twice when police skipped parts of the Miranda warnings and when detectives continued questioning Chad Dorman after he asked for an attorney. The prosecution presented several witnesses, including police officers who responded to the scene. They were asked to describe their encounters with Chad. The prosecutors said that nearly all of Chad's interactions with sheriff's deputies and detectives were recorded. The first witness to testify in court was Claremont County Deputy Chad Poffman, who was a canine handler. Deputy Poffman said he was the first officer to arrive at the scene. When he approached Chad's home, the first thing he saw was the defendant sitting on the porch near a rifle. As they drove to the sheriff's office, Chad shouted some things that the deputy couldn't make out. However, at one point, the deputy said he heard Chad clearly say, "Take me to jail." Detective Michael Ross from the Claremont County Sheriff's Office was also questioned in the court. He said Chad knew what was being read to him because he said, "Yep," before the detective finished reading the rights. He said during the questioning in the interrogation room, Chad repeatedly denied killing his sons. However, he later said something that Detective Ross said he considered very important. Chad mentioned the Bible during his testimony. Detective Ross remembered Chad saying something important. He said, "The Bible says you kill your firstborn, your secondborn, and your thirdborn, but first you kill your wife. I didn't kill my wife." Suspect who's in custody clearly asked for a lawyer. If they clearly asked for a lawyer, which I've done on other cases, on other homicide cases, they clearly asked for a lawyer. I stopped questioning them, which I've done before. In this case, he did not clearly say he wanted a lawyer. But you said that you tried to clarify it with "that's what you're saying." According to court documents, Chad asked for a lawyer after the questioning started. But the detective didn't listen to him, Everybody knows we trust, except perhaps for the detectives involved, that when a custodial interrogation is underway and the suspect clearly says, "I want a lawyer," that isn't the start of a test. That isn't the start of an officer's invitation to a detective to quiz about name, rank, and serial number of a lawyer. That's the time they stop. Also, the motion to suppress states that Detective Ross left Chad alone for a while and then returned and continued questioning him as if Chad hadn't asked for a lawyer. The defense lawyer later asked Detective Ross if he had read Chad his Miranda rights in full. Ross replied that he hadn't, but he believed he had covered the most important parts. "All right, now you discussed briefly the Miranda rights. You did not read all the Miranda rights on State Exhibit 3, did you? On your card? Word for word?" "No." "Well, you left out some pretty important parts, didn't you?" So after a long court hearing, the judge decided that the investigators did not follow the rules when they arrested Chad in June 2023. Judge Richard Ferentz stated that Chad's Miranda rights were not respected. Chad's lawyers also claimed that he asked for a lawyer at least twice during his 3-hour interrogation session, but they ignored his request and kept asking him questions. The lawyer also said that Chad pleaded guilty earlier because he was under the pressure of investigators. Later, the judge decided that the detectives did not fully explain Chad's rights before interrogating him, so any statements he made during that time would not be used in the next court proceedings. This decision affected how Chad's trial would proceed, as it restricted the evidence that could be presented against him. This legal twist added complexity to the trial, prolonging the legal process and intensifying public interest in the outcome of the case. Dorman could face the death penalty if he is convicted, and his case is scheduled to go to trial in July. But now with this recent ruling, that could change. This is big news and could really be key to this case. A final court hearing for Chad is set for June 14th, just before the first anniversary of the events. His trial is expected to start on July 8th, 2024. So what was the motive behind his killings? The authorities have not yet determined the motive behind his actions. The reason Chad shot Clayton, Hunter, and Chase is unclear, but some people speculate that he did it to hurt his 34-year-old wife because he believed she was cheating on him. But this hasn't been confirmed. A memorial ride for the Dorman boys. Earlier today, hundreds of people came out to this fundraiser where all the money goes to their family. So while the boys' father is waiting to go on trial for their murders, the community feels this fundraiser is the very least that they can do. A 15-mile ride through New Richmond. As you can look around, we're close to 1,000 people. Alan Easterday organized a memorial motorcycle, jeep, and car ride, which attracted over 100 participants to raise funds for the family. Another memorial service was held on June 26th to honor the 3 boys. Community members gathered at First Baptist Church of Glen Estee, dressed in bright colors as requested by the family. And 24 hours later, the community still struggling to make sense of the shootings and the 3 innocent lives that were taken. Support for family, friends, classmates, first responders is pouring into Monroe Township with no signs of stopping. WLWT News 5's Jatera McGee is live in Monroe Township where, since the tragic event, many people have come together to remember the 3 young boys who were lost. One of these services was a special candlelight vigil at the elementary school where the oldest boy used to go to school. The co-funding organizer, Rachel Brown, started a fundraising campaign on GoFundMe to help pay for 3 deceased children's funerals. So far, people have donated almost $180,000, which is much more than the initial goal. Rachel Brown mentioned in a post that the children's mother was like a sister to her. She wrote, "My sister lost her 3 amazing babies yesterday. Nothing will make this better. It will never be okay. But please, if you can find it in your heart to help relieve the financial burden of this tragedy, please donate. No one should ever have to go through this. You must be wondering where Chad Dorman is now. He is held in custody in Claremont County Jail, and his case is still ongoing, with many questions still on everyone's mind. Why did he do that? How can someone kill their own children so brutally? The answer to these questions remains a mystery, but the community is hopeful that justice will be served and the truth will be revealed. The community is still trying to come to terms with the loss of these three young boys. Everyone wants to find a way to heal and move forward. As the legal process continues, people are united in their desire for justice. The tragic events have also led to discussions about family relationships, mental health, and how communities can support each other. People are coming together to help the surviving family members and make sure something like this never happens again. Story 3. Maria Munoz, a young woman full of life, met a tragic end on September 22nd, 2020 that shocked her loved ones. The community was puzzled about who could have done such a terrible thing until they were shocked to discover that Maria's own husband was the unexpected suspect. As the details emerged, a web of secrets and deception was revealed, leaving everyone close to Maria shocked and saddened. In the bustling state of Texas, a shocking event unfolded that left everyone shocked. Maria Munoz, a young and lively woman full of dreams, met a tragic end that deeply affected her family and friends. The events leading to her unexpected death on September 22nd, 2020 left many stunned, especially when suspicions turned toward her own husband as the possible culprit. The story took a dark turn when toxicology reports found 7 different drugs in her system. Also, it's hard to believe Maria's journal was also the key evidence that helped catch the killer. It's crazy to think that something Maria wrote down played such a big part in solving the case. As the investigation progressed, secrets began to surface, revealing a side of the story that nobody saw coming. Maria Munoz, born on January 25, 1989, was one of 3 children to Marisol Rodriguez and Jorge Luis Munoz. Growing up in a vibrant and loving household in Puerto Rico, she faced early loss when her mother passed away. Also, around that time, she met Joel Pellet. Despite this hardship, Maria took on the role of caregiver for her siblings, Marisol Munoz and Peter Hernandez. Maria and Pellet first met in Puerto Rico, Maria's home country. At that time, Pellet was a nursing student with big dreams, and Maria was also a nurse. Pellet was 11 years older than Maria, but despite the age gap of 11 years, they both tied the knot in 2011. Later, they moved to Laredo, Texas, where Pellet secured a prestigious position as a nurse anesthetist at a local hospital, bringing in a substantial income. Their newfound financial stability afforded them a life of extravagance, filled with luxury cars and extravagant vacations. Maria Munoz, age 31, lived in Laredo, Texas, as a full-time mother caring for her 2 young sons and her husband, Joel Pellet, aged 42. She left her job just to take good care of her children. Maria, a loving stay-at-home mom, cherished her 2 young boys. Every day, she would take them to the park to play and read to them before bedtime, showing her dedication as a mother. While she enjoyed being at home with her children, she also found joy in playing the piano as a hobby. Despite her happiness as a stay-at-home mom, she always held on to her dream of returning to school and becoming a nurse again. For a long time, everything appeared to be going smoothly in their relationship. Pellet would often share pictures of his wife and children, proudly talking about how wonderful they were to his friends and colleagues. However, behind the scenes, a different story was unfolding. In the year 2018, shortly after Maria welcomed their second son, those close to Pellet began to observe a shift in his behavior. He underwent a noticeable transformation, losing weight and gaining muscle. He also became increasingly sociable with other women, displaying flirtatious behavior that did not align with the conduct expected of a married man. He began removing photos that featured his wife and children, instead opting to post pictures of himself alone. This change in his online activity gave the impression that he was living a single life, without the responsibilities and commitments of a married man with a family. That same year, the colleagues observed Pellet becoming increasingly friendly with a surgical nurse named Janet Arredondo. Over time, it became clear that they both had started a secret relationship, carrying on an affair behind Maria's back. But in early 2020, Maria's worst fears came true. She found airline tickets that Pellet had bought for himself and Janet to travel to Europe. This discovery left Maria heartbroken and depressed. She had trusted him and thought their marriage was strong, but then she felt betrayed. Maria was devastated to learn that the life they had built together for 10 years was a lie. She didn't know how to move forward, feeling lost and alone. In the midst of her emotional breakdown, she sought help from a therapist to cope with the devastating truth about her marriage. The therapist prescribed medication to support Maria through her mental health struggles. Around this time, Maria turned to writing journals as a way to process her thoughts and emotions. Soon, things were getting worse between Pellet and Maria. So on September 19, 2020, Maria went to Janet's house and saw Pellet's car parked in the driveway. She confronted them at the house, and when he came out, Maria made him choose between her and Janet. In answer, he said he'll choose Janet. During the argument, Janet called the police, but Maria and Pellet had left by the time they arrived. The police called Maria while she was driving with Pellet, and they heard him yelling at her in the background. When they got home, he became so angry that he punched a hole in Maria's car windshield, which was an alarming display of force and anger. The following morning, on Sunday, September 20th, Maria sent Pellet a text message expressing her intention to hire a lawyer to help sort out their situation. However, he replied, suggesting that they handle things without involving lawyers, as he believed it would be too costly. Just a few hours after their text exchange, it seemed that he had a change of heart. He sent Maria an email expressing his deep sadness and inner turmoil. In the email, he conveyed his desire to sit down with Maria for an honest and non-argumentative conversation. This is what he said: "I am so sad I am hurting inside. I want to sit down with you to talk without arguing. A heart to heart." Maria replied to his email, and they both agreed to meet at approximately 5 p.m. the next night on Monday, September 21st. Before going to meet him, she was so nervous and then messaged her friend Yasmin Martinez that today they were going to meet. This is what she said: "I just ask if you can pray for me." But sadly, her prayers were not answered, and the meeting ended in a horrifying way. On September 22nd, 2020, Pellet dialed 911 in a panic, mentioning that his wife might have taken some prescription pills and was not breathing. Officer De La Cruz was the first who came to Pellet's house at around 1:40 a.m., and his body cam was also recording every detail. The officer found Pellet at the top of the stairs near the main bedroom. He was still wearing his green hospital scrubs and was doing CPR on his wife. Their 2 sons were sleeping in the rooms close by. As soon as the paramedics got there, they took over doing CPR on Maria. While first responders were working diligently to save Maria's life, another officer approached Pellet to inquire about the pills she had reportedly taken. Without hesitation, Pellet went to a nearby bathroom, searched through the medicine cabinet, and retrieved a bottle. He handed it to the officers, who later discovered it contained a prescription for clonazepam, a benzodiazepine medication used to manage acute anxiety, panic attacks, and sometimes epilepsy. Benzodiazepines, like clonazepam, work by slowing down the nervous system to induce a calming effect. Upon examining the bottle, the officer noticed that the pills were actually prescribed to Pellet, not Maria. Another detail that caught the officer's attention was that the pill bottle had been returned to the medicine cabinet. Typically, in cases of overdose, the pill bottle is found near the person. Afterward, Pellet was captured on body camera picking up the pill container from the floor and placing it in his pocket. De La Cruz questioned himself as to why he would retrieve the pills. Could he be concealing something? Another reason to suspect Pellet was De La Cruz also came across a needle catheter on the stairs in the couple's home. This seemed odd to him. Pellet and Maria had 2 young children, so finding a needle on the stairs raised questions about why it was there. This is not all. Investigators also uncovered more than just a needle. They also discovered syringes and 4 equipment neatly packed in a medical bag. While this finding may seem ordinary given Pellet's profession as an anesthesia nurse, the presence of these medical tools outside a clinical setting raised intriguing questions for the investigators. Despite this unusual circumstance, Pellet informed the officers that Maria had been struggling with deep depression recently. He explained that her mental health had been deteriorating, leading her to take the pills in an attempt to cope with her overwhelming emotions. So, despite first responders' best efforts, Maria couldn't be revived. It's hard to believe, but by 3:58 a.m. that day, she was pronounced dead. After Maria was declared dead, officers took Pellet downstairs to the kitchen for additional questioning. He then explained to the officers that on that day, he and Maria had met for a conversation. After their discussion, they both got intimate and then he took a shower. Upon exiting the shower, he found Maria asleep. He went downstairs for a while, though the reason for this was not clarified. When he returned upstairs and approached Maria, he discovered she was unresponsive and not breathing. While talking, the officer noticed Pellet's strange behavior. He was sweating very badly and was literally unable to answer simple questions about the incident. The officer also observed that Pellet's level of sweating was noticeably higher than anyone else present, even the first responder who had been trying to save Maria's life for the past 2 hours. This made officers more suspicious of him. For further questioning, he was then taken by Sergeant Luis Mata to the police station. At the police station, Pellet was left alone in the interrogation room for a while before an officer came in. His every action was getting recorded on video. When officers watched the footage, they were shocked to see how Pellet suddenly went crazy. He started screaming, crying, hitting the walls, and throwing furniture around the room. He was being so loud and out of control that people in the hallway and other rooms nearby got scared hearing all the voices coming from his room. So at 4 a.m., an officer, Sergeant Luis Mata, entered the room to talk to Pellet. During this conversation, he opened up once again about the events leading up to Maria's death. Shockingly, he also confessed to the officer that he had been involved with another woman named Janet. He revealed that he had actually left the family home 5 months earlier and was living with her at the time of Maria's death. He shared that he had been in a relationship with Janet for 2 years by then, and Maria had been aware of the affair for a while. According to him, on the night of Maria's passing, he visited the family home to have a conversation with her about their marriage. After their discussion, they got intimate. He said he thought Maria was asleep in her room, but only 10 minutes later when he returned to check on her, but tragically found her unresponsive. He later confessed to the officer that he gave Maria the medication prescribed to him, clonazepam, to help ease her anxiety and depression. However, he couldn't provide details to the officer about how much she had taken or how many pills were left in the bottle before she accessed them. Unfortunately, he was unable to provide any additional information to help clarify the situation. After all the questioning, he was released. So the next step was to do Maria's autopsy. The autopsy took place just 8 hours after her death, which was relatively soon after she passed away. This timing meant that whatever caused her death should still be detectable in her stomach contents. As the investigation into Maria's death intensified, the autopsy results delivered a shocking revelation. Contrary to initial suspicions, No traces of pills were discovered in her stomach. However, the medical examiner's report uncovered a shocking clue: a small, red mark on the inside of her elbow. What was more shocking was that it was a pinprick mark. The small red mark on her arm was concerning because it suggested she may have been injected with something. This unexpected discovery led investigators to explore the significance of this mark and its potential connection to her death. Soon, the investigators discovered another thing from Maria's house. So what was that? A journal was found at Maria's place. As it was mentioned earlier, to cope with the anxiety and depression, she started writing a journal, and that journal helped investigators a lot to know who the culprit was. So what they found in that journal was really heart-wrenching. In that journal, she wrote her thoughts and experiences. Through her writings, the investigators discovered that Maria loved her husband and wanted to preserve their family, even though she recognized his wish to be with someone else. She wrote, in her journal entries, Maria detailed her heartbreak when Pellet left their Laredo home, leaving her to care for their 2 young sons. Her diary and recordings on her cell phone helped investigators uncover her husband's abusive behavior, documenting her emotional journey from grief to healing and a newfound optimism for the future. She also wrote in the journal, I don't want to be sad anymore. I don't want my heart to hurt. I don't want my mind to be in torture. Please, I beg you, O Lord. The day before her untimely death, Maria Munoz wrote the following in her journal. What is it that I want? 1. Move forward. The entries in Maria's journal, the day before her death, showed her desire to live and move forward with her life. There was no mention of suicide or any plans to end her life. So after going through her journal, the investigators didn't think she had committed suicide. They needed more information to understand what really happened. So this was what happened next. Pellet's previous employer, Dr. John Hunsinger, who was an anesthesiologist, became aware of the autopsy findings. He contacted the lead detective, De La Cruz, who was working on the case, and expressed his concerns. Dr. Hunsinger recommended that the investigators should conduct a comprehensive toxicology screening. So they did that. In January 2021, investigator Sergeant Luis Mata and De La Cruz received the long-awaited toxicology test results. Contrary to Pellet's claim of clonazepam, Maria did not have that drug in her system. However, the toxicology report revealed a shocking truth: the presence of 7 other drugs: morphine, Demerol, Versed, propofol, ketamine, lidocaine, and Narcan. These medications are commonly used in surgical procedures. Propofol and ketamine are used as sedatives and for pain management, often administered intravenously during surgical procedures. Most people cannot access these drugs easily, and even many nurses and other medical professionals may never come into contact with medications like propofol and ketamine unless they work directly in anesthesiology. The presence of propofol in Maria's body was the most shocking finding for the investigators. The investigators thought that Pellet is a nurse anesthetist, so he would have access to propofol based on his profession. When Dr. Hunsinger, who worked with Pellet and had experience using propofol, saw the amount found in Maria's system, he said it was the highest quantity he had ever encountered. Based on this, the doctors strongly believed that propofol was the specific cause of Maria's death, as Pellet would know the appropriate dosage to sedate someone or cause an overdose. Additionally, a small mark on Maria's arm indicated that she may have been injected with the substance. Investigators believed that, with the toxicological report, Pellet's suspicious behavior, and Maria's journal, they had enough evidence to arrest Pellet for the murder of his wife. So authorities soon got an arrest warrant against Pellet. De La Cruz wasted no time and went to arrest Pellet. Surprisingly, he did not resist arrest, almost as if he had anticipated and accepted his impending fate. Soon he was taken to the police station, marking the beginning of a new chapter in the investigation as law enforcement officials prepared to question him again about the events surrounding Maria Munoz's tragic death. He had to face the consequences of his heinous act. So the trial started on March 21st, 2023. As the legal proceedings unfolded, both the prosecution and defense presented their cases. A prosecution team composed entirely of women, known as Maria's team, utilized Maria Munoz's journal entries to construct a compelling case against Pellet. This was done to illustrate to the jury the type of wife and mother Maria was. The prosecutors described Maria as an excellent mother who was caring and intelligent. They expressed feeling her vibrant spirit through the pages of her journal. During that trial, the prosecutors also suspected that Pellet first drugged Maria by putting some substances in her drink to make her sleepy. Once she was unconscious, he injected propofol into her arm. Prosecutors also believed that Pellet waited a long time before calling 911 so that the first responders would not be able to revive her when they arrived. The prosecutors stated that the journals helped them comprehend the challenges Maria faced, which in turn fueled their determination to seek justice in her case. During the final arguments, Pellet's lawyer, Roberto Bali, informed the jurors that his client wanted to work things out with his wife, Maria Munoz, before her passing. Bali reminded the jury about the medical examiner's report, which said Maria's cause of death was still unclear. He told them there was not enough proof to show Pellet was responsible for her death. Bali pointed out that Pellet had given Maria a drug called Narcan on the night she died, which is used to reverse overdoses. He even said both Pellet and Munoz struggled with drug addiction. Bali also argued that Maria Munoz willingly consumed the drugs without coercion, as there were no signs of force on her body. However, after investigating Maria's social circles, friends, and family, it became clear that she was not a drug addict, and Pellet was the only person who could have provided her with that substantial quantity of propofol. Authorities were also able to convince Pellet's girlfriend, surgical nurse Janet Arredondo, to testify against him. She revealed that he had admitted to her that he gave Maria something to calm her down, and confirmed that he had brought drugs, including propofol, home from work. The jury took less than 1 hour to reach the verdict. At last, after a 9-day trial on March 30th, 2023, a jury reached a verdict, finding Pellet guilty of the murder of his wife, Maria. On April 27, 2023, Pellet received a life sentence for the murder conviction, plus an additional 10 years and a $10,000 fine for tampering with evidence. So where is Pellet now? Joel Pellet is currently serving a life sentence at a Texas Department of Criminal Justice, facing the consequences of his heinous actions. His imprisonment stands as a symbol of accountability and a solemn tribute to Maria's life, ensuring that her memory is honored through the pursuit of truth and the upholding of justice. The motive behind the killing is unclear, but according to the prosecution, Joel Pellet's motive for killing his wife, Maria Munoz, was rooted in his desire to end his marriage and be with his girlfriend, Janet Arredondo. Ultimately, justice had to be served, and the verdict ensured that Pellet was held accountable for his actions. The jury's decision brings some measure of closure to this tragic case, affirming that such heinous acts will not go unpunished. The conviction underscores the importance of upholding justice and sends a clear message that those who commit such crimes will face the full extent of the law. Story 4. Jacqueline Jackie Vandegrift was born in Carrollton, Texas on March 4, 1992. She was the youngest of 2 daughters. Throughout her life, Jackie resided in the colony in Frisco, Texas, where she was raised alongside her loving family. Before Jackie could walk, she learned to somersault, showcasing her natural talent for gymnastics. This early introduction fostered her passion for the sport and paved the way for her future success. Jackie's parents recognized her potential at just 3 and enrolled her in gymnastics courses. Over the following years, She honed her skills and eagerly participated in various competitions. Jackie reached level 5 in the Texas State Gymnastics Association. Those who knew Jackie described her as a warm and compassionate person. Jackie had a heart of gold and genuinely cared about the well-being of others. She was a loyal friend who encouraged her loved ones to be the best versions of themselves. Through words of encouragement or simply being there to listen, Jackie's company brought comfort and joy to those around her. Jackie's kindness extended beyond human relationships. She deeply loved animals, was a lifelong vegetarian, and believed in supporting pet adoption from no-kill shelters. Her compassion extended to all living beings. Jackie was passionate about reading. Her favorite book series was Harry Potter, and she would lose herself in the magical world of Hogwarts. In addition to reading, Jackie had a deep love for music. Jackie's taste was eclectic, ranging from Pink to James Taylor and Rob Thomas. One of her greatest passions was musicals, especially Rent. She would go to every performance of the musical whenever it was in town. After completing her high school education at Wakeland High School in Frisco, Jackie decided to enroll in the Paul Mitchell School for Cosmetology. She completed her training and earned her license as an esthetician. Determined to continue her education, Jackie enrolled at Texas Woman's University and majored in nutrition and food science. She knew that good nutrition was crucial and believed everyone deserved access to proper nourishment. Jackie envisioned a future where she could educate others about the importance of eating well and empower them to make healthier choices. It seemed as if Jackie Van de Griff was destined for greatness. The college junior was on a path toward achieving her dreams and positively impacting the world. However, in the summer of 2016, a fateful encounter with an evil person would tragically end her life. On Wednesday, September 14, 2016, at around dawn, an officer with the Grapevine Police Department in Grapevine, Texas, received a disturbing call. The caller informed the officer that someone had found a body out by Grapevine Lake. Upon receiving the call, the officer immediately headed to the scene. Upon arriving, the officer walked into a wooded area and discovered a worn footpath. Following the path, he eventually came upon a burned patch of land. In this area was a plastic blue kiddie pool, and inside this pool was a body. The officer quickly realized that the body had been set on fire, leaving it burned beyond recognition. It was impossible to determine its identity, as it lacked any distinguishing features that could identify whether it was an adult, child, male or female, or even the race of the victim. With the body's condition making it difficult to identify, the badly burned remains were transported to the medical examiner's office. Fingerprint identification would later reveal that the body belonged to 24-year-old Jackie Van de Griff. As detectives delved into Jackie's final moments, they learned she had last been seen in Denton, near College. Jackie had visited 2 bars, Fry Street Public House, and Shots and Crafts. As detectives waited for the security footage from those establishments, Jackie's body was autopsied by the medical examiner. Jackie had been killed, dismembered, decapitated, and set on fire, and her body had been further mutilated after death. The most chilling discovery, though, was that her killer had removed her heart. News of Jackie's murder began to spread around Denton. The detectives received tips from people who claimed to have seen the fire at the crime scene, with a suspicious man loitering around it. Detectives eventually managed to obtain the CCTV footage from 2 bars Jackie had visited around the time of her death. The first bar was the Fry Street Public House, where a man was seen entering the establishment at 7 p.m. He sat at the bar and was seen having a drink. 1 hour later, Jackie walked into the Fry Street Public House. While sitting at the bar, Jackie engaged in conversation with the bartender and this man. The footage captured their interactions and provided valuable insights into their possible connection. About 45 minutes after the footage showed Jackie entering the Fry Street public house, she made a tweet on her Twitter account. It read, "Glad I decided to get off Tinder and walk to a bar. After spending significant time at the Fry Street public house, Jackie and the man left the bar together. They headed to another establishment called Shots and Crafts, where they mingled with a group of women. Around 9:45 p.m., Jackie and the man left Shots and Crafts together. The detectives could track Jackie and the man using the CCTV footage. They followed their journey and discovered that the man had taken Jackie to his car. At the convenience store, Jackie can be seen in the man's vehicle, and at that point all appeared okay. However, that was the last sighting of Jackie before her murder. The detectives spoke to the bartender from the Fry Street public house. According to the bartender, Jackie came in looking to apply for a job when she had a friendly conversation with him and a male customer at the bar. However, the bartender admitted he had no further information regarding what became of Jackie and the male customer after they left his establishment. Next, the detectives found the woman Jackie and the man were seen on the security footage at Shots and Crafts. One of the women in the group mentioned that she had received a business card from the man Jackie was seen with. According to the woman, she had exchanged contact information with the man because he was a personal trainer, and she expressed interest in fitness. Although it seemed insignificant initially, this seemingly trivial detail would prove to be a crucial breakthrough in the investigation. To their surprise, the woman still had the card in her hand and willingly shared the information with the investigators. The name on the card? Charles Bryant. By this point, the detectives had obtained footage from Walmart at 4 a.m. that showed Charles purchasing a shovel. The detectives conducted a thorough investigation into the true identity of Charles Bryant, the last person seen with Jackie before she was murdered. Their findings proved to be deeply unsettling. Charles Bryant, a 29-year-old man, lived approximately 20 miles away from Denton, but the city held a significant allure for him. What was drawing him there was the desperate attempt to rekindle his relationship with ex-girlfriend Caitlin. Caitlin, a resident of Grapevine, was attending the University of North Texas. 3 months earlier, Caitlin met Charles Bryant at her home in Grapevine, Texas, when he came into the restaurant where she worked as a server on the day of her high school graduation. Charles was different from the high school boys Caitlin was used to. Firstly, he was in his late 20s, almost a decade older than Caitlin. Secondly, Charles was covered in tattoos, showcasing his muscular physique. He worked as a personal trainer and bartender, accumulating unique skills and traits that intrigued Caitlin. During the summer of 2016, Caitlin spent nearly every day with Charles at Grapevine Lake. Their attraction grew stronger with each passing day, and Caitlin was captivated by her older boyfriend's enigmatic nature. However, not everyone shared Caitlin's enthusiasm. As Caitlin's relationship with Charles progressed, her mother became aware of their significant age gap. Concerned for her daughter's well-being, she asked Caitlin to show her a picture of Charles. While initially willing to give Charles the benefit of the doubt, Caitlin's mother admitted to feeling an immediate unease upon gazing into his piercing eyes. It was as though she was staring directly at evil. Caitlin's mother, growing increasingly concerned for her daughter's well-being, voiced her concerns, urging her to reconsider her relationship with Charles. However, Caitlin dismissed her warnings, dismissing them as mere parental concerns. "He's so nice to me," Caitlin insisted, oblivious to the sinister nature lurking beneath the surface of her seemingly innocent attraction. Little did she know that her harmless romance was about to turn into a nightmarish ordeal. Initially, Caitlin was happy with her new relationship with her older boyfriend. However, as the weeks progressed, doubts began to surface, and she started to question whether her mother was right. Charles seemed excessively narcissistic and manipulative, and Caitlin couldn't shake the feeling that he thought highly of himself. To make her feel bad, Charles would constantly remind her that she could never find anyone as good as him. By mid-August 2016, when Caitlin was preparing to move to Denton for her first year at college, she decided to break up with Charles. The red flags were becoming too numerous to ignore any longer. However, the following day, Charles showed up at Caitlin's home and begged her to get back together, claiming he was going to do better. Caitlin gave in and resumed their relationship. Within a week, Caitlin had moved out of Grapevine into Denton to start school. Once Caitlin moved away, she ended her relationship with Charles once and for all. However, Charles was not the type to take no for an answer. On August 24th, police found Charles on the University of North Texas campus while conducting a traffic stop because of the way he was driving. The officer thought it was a DUI, but Charles was not over the legal limit of alcohol. Nevertheless, he was charged with several outstanding warrants and let go. Several hours later, Charles returned to the University of North Texas and knocked on Caitlin's dorm room door, which he had somehow managed to locate. Caitlin called 911, and by the time the officer arrived, Charles had already vanished. When the officer questioned Caitlin, she explained that she had been sick of the way Charles treated her and spoke to her, prompting her to end their relationship, for Charles did not accept this decision. Taking Caitlin's concerns seriously, the police officer issued Charles a temporary no trespass order, banning him from the UNT campus. However, Charles was not deterred by this setback. He was determined to find a way to get to Caitlin, regardless of the restrictions placed upon him by the school. On August 31st, Charles stumbled upon Caitlin on her first day of a new job. Recognizing Charles, Caitlin asked him to leave. Caitlin scheduled a meeting with her manager to discuss the situation and request that he bar Charles from entering the business. However, the manager informed Caitlin that this request was beyond his control. The incident at Caitlin's workplace forced Caitlin to quit her job. Despite Caitlin's efforts, Charles was determined to find a way to confront her. He would stop at nothing to exact his revenge and cause her further harm. The cycle of fear and intimidation continued as Charles's obsession consumed him, and Caitlin's life remained in jeopardy. In the meantime, Caitlin was residing on campus at UNT, which worried her mother greatly. Concerned for her safety, her mother pleaded for her to return home so they could protect her. However, Caitlin was confident in her decision to stay in her dorm room, feeling safe within the confines of the university. On September 6th, a chilling incident occurred when Charles reappeared at Caitlin's dorm on the UNT campus. As he banged on the door to her room, Caitlin feared the worst and sought refuge in her suitemate's closet. From her hiding place, she could hear Charles urging her to come out, telling her he had something for her. Caitlin's darkest fears began to manifest, and her mind raced with terrifying scenarios of what Charles might have in store for her. Terrified for her life, Caitlin made a split-second decision and called 911 while inside the low-cost, talking in hushed tones, fearing that Charles could hear her. The dispatcher repeatedly requested that she speak up, but Caitlin was too frightened to speak clearly. Despite the dispatcher's attempts, Caitlin's voice remained barely audible due to the overwhelming fear she experienced. As time went on, the police arrived at the scene, but unfortunately, Charles had already fled the scene. However, he left a chilling reminder of his presence, flowers, and a handwritten, 2-page letter addressed to Caitlin. The letter contained disturbing messages and further heightened the fear of the young woman. Minutes after the incident, officers managed to apprehend Charles outside campus, dressed in running clothes, as if he was exercising as a student. He was arrested for trespassing and released on bail a few hours later. Despite Caitlin's efforts to remove Charles from all her communication channels by blocking him on her phone, email, and social media, he continued to devise new ways to contact her. Charles created multiple accounts, ensuring that he maintained some form of communication with her. Recognizing that Charles's behavior had escalated, the police stepped in to assist Caitlin in obtaining a protective court order. On the very next day, she formally filed a petition for the order, which granted her legal protection from further harassment. However, even after his first arrest, Charles continued to try to communicate with Caitlin. These unwanted communications resulted in his second arrest for stalking, as he continued to violate the terms of the protective order. It was his third arrest within 2 weeks. Following his second arrest, Charles posted a $5,000 bond and was released from custody. While out on bail, Charles Bryant went to Fry Street, where Caitlin normally hung out. Detectives were positive Charles met Jackie Van de Grift there. Even though there was a lot of circumstantial evidence linking Charles to Jackie's murder, there was nothing physical. When the detectives helping Caitlin with her stalking case at UNT heard Charles was the prime suspect in a murder, they worried for Caitlin's safety. Caitlin said she was okay. Still, in the days following Jackie's murder, Charles sent her several photos, texts, and emails. On September 18th, the police arrested Charles for violating Caitlin's protective order. While Charles was in jail on those charges, the detectives hoped to find more evidence connecting him to Jackie's death. Detectives questioned Charles, and when shown a picture of Jackie, he said he saw her at the bar but knew nothing about her. At the same time as the detectives questioned Charles, investigators served a search warrant on his home. During the search, investigators found a large military-style knife and a Texas woman's university purse, which turned out to be Jackie's school purse. Furthermore, investigators found a kiddie pool missing from Charles's backyard that matched the one Jackie was found dead inside. The detectives consulted an expert with extensive experience and knowledge in dealing with prolific killers. This expert, who had worked with the Texas Rangers, was well versed in understanding the mindset of people like Charles. They knew that men like Charles often had a strong desire to talk about their crimes. When the initial interview began, Charles denied having any recollection of Jackie. However, the expert believed that Charles was hiding something. The expert sensed that Charles did know what had happened to Jackie. To create a friendly and open atmosphere, the expert attempted to lighten the tension in the interrogation room. The expert made it seem like they were simply two buddies having a casual conversation at a local bar. By establishing a rapport, the expert aimed to ease Charles's mind and gain his trust. As they engaged in conversation, the expert began suggesting possible scenarios to see if Charles would take the bait. The expert tried to portray Jackie as an instigator, leading Charles on and causing frustration. Throughout the conversation, the expert used various tactics to see if Charles would react to certain prompts. However, the expert's approach was not without risk. If the expert pushed too hard or appeared insincere, he could lose Charles's trust and hinder the investigation. Therefore, the expert had to strike a balance, maintaining his friendly demeanor while subtly trying to entice Charles into confessing the truth. During the interview with Charles, the expert closely monitored his responses and mannerisms to understand his character better. Under the pretense of aiding Charles in recalling the events surrounding Jackie's admission, the expert conducted a brief memory exercise. To the expert's surprise, Charles's story began to change slightly. Initially claiming ignorance regarding Jackie's admission, Charles disclosed that he had spoken to her at the Fry Street public house when she went there to apply for a job. As the conversation between the expert and Charles continued, the expert decided to take a different approach. Ordering pizza, the expert hoped that the food might relax Charles, and the detectives could uncover the motive behind Jackie's murder. The detectives involved in the case believed that the catalyst behind Jackie's death was Charles's uncontrollable rage towards his ex-girlfriend, Caitlin. The interrogation lasted for approximately 3 hours, and during this time, Charles admitted to unintentionally killing Jackie during what Charles referred to as kinky sex. According to Charles, the incident took place in his car, and Jackie asked him to choke her with an oversized zip tie that he had in his possession. However, Charles insisted that the death was accidental. Charles claimed that neither he nor Jackie had tightened the zip tie. It had just happened. After the interview, Charles Bryant was charged with Jackie Vandegrift's murder. When Charles was charged with Jackie's murder, his ex-girlfriend Caitlin took to social media to look at Jackie's Facebook page and was shocked to see they were already friends. Suddenly, Caitlin remembered getting a friend request from Jackie's Facebook page on the day her body was found before Caitlin was aware of the case. Caitlin was positive that her ex-boyfriend Charlie and the suspect in Jackie's murder used Jackie's phone to friend request her. Furthermore, a tweet sent out from Jackie's account after her death which read, "Never knew I could feel like this." The police also felt came from Charles after he murdered her. One woman, Christy, was stunned to hear that Charles, whom she had met through a dating app the previous year, had been charged with murder. The Charles she knew was quiet and reserved, but during their brief time together, she observed several red flags that raised her suspicions. Christy claimed that Charles quickly became attached to her, and she eventually decided to end their relationship. However, Charles continued to pursue her, even professing his love for her desperately. This declaration came as a surprise to Christy, as she and Charles had never shared a kiss. Christy's profession, working with abused children, gave her a unique perspective and led her to recognize certain patterns in Charles's behavior. She suspected that he may have been a victim of abuse in his childhood, as she had seen similar patterns in some of her young clients. One day, Christy mustered up the courage to ask Charles if he had been abused as a child. To Christy's surprise, Charles admitted that he had experienced such trauma. However, the police found no verification of Charles's claims of abuse. However, Christy thought it was true that Charles was abused. She claimed because Charles was a nice man and she felt sorry for him, she stayed in touch, albeit at a distance, but never thought he was capable of murder. Because Jackie's autopsy provided few answers, such as her cause of death and where she was killed before she was dismembered and set on fire, the prosecution worried about providing a murder case. The autopsy results failed to provide clear insights into the circumstances surrounding Jackie's death, leaving key questions unanswered. Charles admitted to disposing of Jackie's body after she accidentally died during rough intercourse. During the investigation, Charles confessed to his involvement in disposing of Jackie's body. However, he pleaded not guilty to her murder. The prosecution sought Caitlin, Charles's ex-girlfriend, to testify about his stalking behavior and obsessive, violent tendencies, aiming to demonstrate a link between his rage towards Caitlin and his eventual murder of Jackie, an individual whom even Charles admitted during his interrogation bore a striking resemblance to Caitlin. Caitlin took the stand at trial, although without the presence of a jury. When faced with identifying Charles, she refused to look at him, expressing discomfort. However, when compelled to do so, she reluctantly pointed him out, stating that he had a smirk that sickened her. Following her testimony, Caitlin left the courtroom and broke down in tears, overwhelmed by the emotional impact. Ultimately, the judge ruled that Caitlin would be unable to recount the details of her relationship and subsequent breakup with Charles to the jury. In April 2018, 1.5 years after Jackie's tragic demise, Charles Bryant stood trial for her murder. However, Jackie's best friend found herself unable to bear the sight of Charles. Choosing not to attend the court proceedings, the mere thought of having to confront him face to face was too overwhelming for her to bear. It was a painful reminder of the devastation he had caused to their lives. Story 5. Heidi Ferks, a beloved member of her small Minnesota community, had her life tragically cut short on April 25, 2010 in a brutal murder that left everyone stunned. Who was the culprit? Her own husband. Over a decade later, her husband Nick Ferks got arrested and convicted for her senseless killing, shattering the trust of all who knew them. As the trial progressed, the community was completely surprised by the shocking truths that came out and the discovery of a complicated set of lies that had been kept secret for a long time. In the small town of St. Paul, Minnesota, where everyone knew each other's names, a brutal crime shook the community to its core. Heidi Ferks, a bright young soul, had her life brutally taken from her in a senseless act of violence. The mystery surrounding her tragic end on April 25, 2010 has haunted investigators for many years, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions in the community searching for justice. As the case went cold for many years, Heidi's family and friends struggled with not knowing what happened, feeling even more sadness and pain. After decades of searching, the investigators finally uncovered the culprit, bringing closure to a long-standing mystery that had haunted the community for years. However, in the midst of finding closure, a significant question remained unanswered. What drove the perpetrator to commit the terrible act that ended Heidi's life? Born on December 14, 1984, Heidi Marie Ferks, the youngest of John and Alinda Erickson's 3 children and their only daughter, lived her life to the fullest. Known for her playful and artistic nature, she graduated from high school in 2003 and continued her education at the University of Northwestern in Roseville. Alongside her studies, she was a regular attendee at Calvary Church in the city, a place she had been a part of since her early years. It was at this church where she met Nicholas Ferks, also known as Nick, and together they took on the role of youth group leaders, serving their community with dedication and passion. Nicholas Ferks was born on February 25, 1983, to Julie and Steve Ferks. Nick, a driven and ambitious young man, dedicated his days to his work as the director of operations at a reputable carpet cleaning company. Known for his well-rounded personality and strong work ethic, he had found his true match in Heidi, a woman he had met at their shared place of worship, Calvary Church. In the year 2005, at the tender ages of 22 and 20, respectively, Nikki and Heidi made the joyous decision to take their relationship to the next level. Surrounded by their loved ones and the familiar walls of the church that had witnessed the blossoming of their love, they exchanged vows that sealed their commitment to one another. Nick and Heidi's marriage seemed flawless to those around them. The couple shared a passion for travel and biking, enjoying these activities together. They were active members of their church community and took pleasure in hosting dinner parties for their friends and loved ones. Heidi had recently begun working in an administrative role at a financial services firm where her father was employed. Nick and Heidi's relationship appeared strong and promising, with their bond growing even stronger over time. But no one knew behind the closed doors of their home a different story unfolded. Heidi didn't know that her life was about to take a darker turn. On a fateful morning of April 25, 2010, Heidi called 911 from her home in St. Paul, Minnesota, saying someone had broken in. Only 38 seconds into the call, Heidi was giving her address when she suddenly yelled, "No," and a gunshot was heard. 65 seconds after the initial gunshot, Nick Ferks used Heidi's phone to contact the dispatcher. This is what he said: "Please, someone just broke into my house and shot me and my wife." While on the phone, Nick cried uncontrollably and repeatedly said, "Oh, my Heidi, and my wife is dead. Please get here." He also shouted, "No." When the police arrived at the scene, they found Heidi unresponsive in the kitchen with a gunshot wound at the back. While Nick was beside her on the floor, still talking to the 911 dispatcher, he was very upset and had been shot in the upper left leg. He told the police that 1 or 2 people had broken into their home. He grabbed his shotgun and tried to escape with his wife through the back door. As they ran towards the detached garage, The intruder managed to take the shotgun from him and then shot both Nick and Heidi. Tragically, Heidi was declared deceased at the scene, her life cut short by the events that unfolded. Meanwhile, Nick was quickly transported to the hospital for treatment and was questioned in the hospital by the police. Police asked Nick why he and Heidi left their bedroom, which was safer, to face the possible danger. He said they were just trying to get out of the house through the back door. Soon, Nick's wounds were treated in the hospital, and he was released in just 3 hours. Later, he was again interviewed in the police station about the incident. At the police station, Nick talked about what happened in detail. He said he remembers watching a movie with Heidi and having wine before going to bed around midnight. Nick said he woke up around 6:10 to 6:15 a.m. when he heard the screen door open and someone messing with the doorknob. The investigators questioned Nick about locking the deadbolt. He admitted that he and Heidi usually made sure to lock it, but he believed he had forgotten to do so that particular night. That night, after hearing the noises, Nick said he took his shotgun from the upstairs closet. He explained that he had brought it up from the basement a month ago because he noticed it was starting to rust. Nick mentioned that the shotgun was empty, but he loaded it when he heard the noises. After that, he woke up Heidi, asked her to call 911, and instructed her to leave the house and go to the garage where their cars were parked. He also shared that he and Heidi had a safety plan. If they ever faced trouble, they agreed to go to the garage where their cars were parked. Nick, who is right-handed, was holding a pair of jeans in his right hand and the shotgun in his left hand as he walked behind Heidi, guiding her toward the garage. Nick recounted that he and Heidi paused next to the front door to get her wallet from the table. It was at this moment, he said, that the door suddenly burst open. A tall, dark-skinned man, approximately 6 feet 1 inch tall and weighing between 200 to 220 pounds, came rushing in. He said the intruder was wearing a dark hooded sweatshirt with the hood pulled tightly around his face. Nick explained that he dropped the jeans, and the intruder seized the barrel of the shotgun. The two men then engaged in a physical struggle. During the altercation, the gun was shot. He said, "My finger accidentally slipped onto the trigger. She was running away, so I must have hit her in the back." Nick recounted that the shot struck Heidi, causing her to collapse immediately. He and the suspect continued fighting over the shotgun until it fired a second time. He stated that the second shot hit him in the upper thigh, causing him to fall to the ground. At that point, the intruder fled out the front door. He also told investigators that Heidi was unresponsive, and then he also lost his senses. Later, he also told police that their house was scheduled to be foreclosed on the very next day, and they had planned to inform their parents and friends about their situation that same day. Nick explained that he and Heidi had fallen behind on their bills, and their house had been foreclosed on and purchased by someone else. They were required to vacate the premises, but they had not shared this information with any of their friends or family. He mentioned that their plan was to pack up their house on Sunday and Monday morning, leaving some of their belongings in the garage to collect later. They intended to find someone to stay with for a while, but fate had something else for them. So, the once peaceful home was left with an air of tragedy, and the lives of Nick and Heidi were forever changed by the devastating events of that fateful morning. The investigation continued. Law enforcement secured the area and interviewed residents. None of the neighbors reported seeing anyone leaving the Firkus residence. One neighbor, Brendan O'Connor, who was looking after kittens in a nearby house, informed the authorities that he heard an argument, followed by gunfire and a plea. "You shot her. You shot me. Please, please no." Although no one witnessed the intruder leaving. After several weeks, Nick proceeded to give the police a sketch of the suspect, which was then shared with the public. Whose sketch was that? After speaking with the police, they released the description that Nick gave of the suspected intruder. A male, race unknown, between 6 feet to 6 feet 2 inches tall, weighing 200 to 220 pounds, wearing a dark, hooded sweatshirt. About 3 weeks later, the police showed a sketch made by an artist hired by Nick's lawyer based on the initial description. In this updated account, Nick specified that the individual was African American and estimated to be between 40 to 60 years of age. During the investigation, the search initially focused on finding an unidentified African American male intruder based on Nick's description. The authorities searched the area thoroughly, hoping to find any evidence or witnesses supporting Nick's story. The investigation into Heidi's death did not lead to any arrests or charges, leaving the case unresolved for many years. After many years, something shocking was revealed. Over 10 years passed with no resolution in Heidi's murder case. Nick seemed to have moved on, marrying Rachel and starting a family. Yet financial troubles resurfaced, leading to suspicions from Rachel about undisclosed problems. Rachel's concerns about their financial situation and Nick's reluctance to discuss it sparked her curiosity. She began to dig deeper, uncovering secrets and inconsistencies in Nick's past. Her discoveries would ultimately lead her to question everything she thought she knew about her husband and his involvement in Heidi's tragic death. Rachel didn't know about the financial problems the couple was facing, similar to what Heidi and Nick went through years ago. Her worries made her call the authorities, which reignited interest in the case. Investigators then investigated Nick's second wife, Rachel Furcas, whom he wed in 2012. When Rachel talked to the authorities, she had already divorced Nick due to his increasing financial problems. Rachel had also recorded their conversation where she confronted Nick about his deceit before their divorce in 2019. She even told investigators he was definitely repeating the same things he did with Heidi with me. I saw a letter that we had not paid our property taxes, and if we didn't pay them, we were going to get evicted by 2020. When Rachel contacted the police with her suspicions, it set in motion a chain of events that would once again thrust the Heidi Furcas murder case into the spotlight. Sergeant Nicole Sipes, who had been assigned to the case, listened intently to Rachel's concerns and began to re-examine the evidence. Sergeant Nicole Sipes of the St. Paul Police Department became deeply invested in uncovering the truth behind Heidi's murder. She made the bold move of enlisting the help of the FBI to analyze the audio recordings from the 911 call, hoping to find clues that could shed light on what happened that fateful night. After carefully examining the audio, the FBI found no proof that a third person was present during the incident. This was surprising, as it contradicted what Heidi's husband had told the police earlier. Sergeant Sipes and her team were confused by this new information. If only Heidi and her husband were in the house, then what exactly happened between them that led to her death? The lack of a third person made them even more suspicious of the husband's possible involvement in the crime. Determined to uncover the truth, the investigation continued with more intensity. The FBI's findings had opened up a new path to follow, and Sergeant Sipes was more committed than ever to bringing justice for Heidi and providing answers to her grieving family. The investigators also obtained financial documents that contradicted the statements Nicholas Furcas had previously made. These records led them to suspect him more strongly in Heidi's murder. Nick's story about what happened kept changing. At first, he said he got his gun, but the intruder took it from him and shot both him and Heidi. Later, he said the intruder didn't take the gun, but his own finger accidentally pulled the trigger, hitting Heidi in the back. Despite thorough investigation, there was a notable absence of any signs of a struggle, such as overturned furniture or marks on the walls. The forensic analysis of the scene contradicted Nick's account of the events, particularly regarding the trajectory of the shot that struck Heidi. Additionally, Heidi's 911 call did not mention seeing an intruder. The lack of evidence of a break-in or intruder at the crime scene also raised the investigators' suspicions. They believed this absence of clues was part of Nick's plan to cover up his involvement in Heidi's death. So soon the arrest warrant was made for Nick Firkus. On May 19, 2021, over a decade after Heidi's death, a SWAT team closed in on Nick Firkus' home in Moundsview and arrested him. He was arrested due to Rachel's suspicions and the dedicated work of Police Sergeant Nicole Sipes. This sudden arrest surprised many who had thought the case had reached a standstill and would never see closure. As the legal process unfolded, the details of the case would be re-examined and the truth behind that fateful night would slowly come to light. The question on everyone's mind was, would Nick be held accountable for Heidi's tragic death? Soon after, Heidi's family released a statement in response to Nicholas' arrest. We're extremely grateful for all those who have worked so hard and long to get the case to this point, and also for everyone who has prayed and stood beside us all these years. We are hopeful that these charges will finally bring out the truth and result in justice for Heidi. Even though we know we can't have her back, we believe Heidi would want us to have the truth. God is honored by truth. Heidi's life and memory is further honored by truth. The family's words conveyed a mix of relief, gratitude, and a steadfast determination to uncover the truth. They acknowledged the tireless efforts of those who had never given up on the case and the unwavering support of the community. Their statement also expressed hope that the charges against Nick would lead to a resolution that would honor Heidi's memory and bring justice to her tragic death. When the case went to trial, Nick Firkus maintained his innocence and entered a plea of not guilty. Additionally, the majority of his family, particularly his father, expressed their belief in his innocence. They asserted that Nick's deep love for Heidi would have prevented him from carrying out such a violent act, but the jury thought otherwise. On February 10, 2023, the unthinkable happened. Nick, the person Heidi trusted most, was convicted of her brutal murder. After agonizing over the evidence for 10 long hours, the jury delivered their verdict, leaving all who knew Heidi reeling in shock and disbelief. In the trial, the prosecution carefully presented a timeline showing a man overwhelmed by serious financial difficulties. They argued that Nick had hidden the full extent of their financial problems from Heidi, and, fearing shame and conflict, resorted to ending her life. Additionally, the prosecution cast doubt on his story of a home invasion, suggesting it might have been a cover-up to deflect attention from himself. The prosecution presented compelling evidence during the trial, including the lack of signs of forced entry and inconsistencies in Nick's account. Perhaps the most persuasive piece of evidence was the conspicuous absence of DNA or physical proof indicating the presence of a third party, specifically the alleged intruder. This absence of evidence cast serious doubt on the validity of Nick's story. During the trial, Prosecutor Rachel Cracker stated that Nick Firkus was unwilling to face the truth of his deception, leading him to commit a shocking act. He said he took Heidi's life and saved his reputation. But in Nick's defense, attorney Robert Richmond contended that the transition from financial distress to murder was illogical. He even said, all of the psychopabble that killing his wife would somehow save his reputation makes no sense. After heated discussions in the trial, the moment of truth arrived as the jury deliberated over Nick's fate. The weight of the evidence, the emotional testimonies, and the legal arguments all culminated in a pivotal decision that would determine whether justice would be served for Heidi's tragic death. So, after extensive court proceedings and careful consideration of the evidence, the jury unanimously decided that Nick Firkus was guilty of first-degree murder. On April 13, 2023, the judge handed down the harshest possible sentence. Nick would spend a life sentence without the possibility of parole. Despite being found guilty in a court of law, Nicholas Firkus continues to assert that he had no involvement in his wife Heidi's tragic demise. He firmly stands by his claim of innocence, even after being sentenced for the crime. On the day of his sentencing, Nick said, I recognize the pain and loss shared by everyone here today. Justice had been served, but at what cost? A family shattered, a community betrayed, and a life taken far too soon. The finality of it all was almost too much to bear. The verdict brought a sense of closure to Heidi's family and friends, but it also left them with the painful realization that the man they thought they knew was capable of such a heinous act. So, you must be thinking, where is Nick now? Nick is currently serving his life sentence at the Minnesota Correctional Facility, located in St. Cloud, Minnesota. In the end, let me tell you what was the motive behind the killing. The main motive behind the killing remains unclear, leaving questions about what drove Nick to commit such a tragic act. However, the investigation revealed that in June 2009, Nick had been served with foreclosure papers on their house. The house was then sold at a sheriff's auction that same month, about 10 months before Heidi was killed. Eviction proceedings had started in February 2010, and hearing was scheduled for March 8, 2010, which Nicholas attended alone. The original lockout date was set for April 9, 2010. Nick called the attorneys and said his grandmother was in the hospital and about to die. He asked to have the lockout moved to April 26th. However, when investigators looked into this, they found no evidence that either of Nick's grandmothers was actually in hospital or died in 2010. So, when questioned by investigators whether Heidi knew about all this or not, Nick claimed that Heidi was fully aware of their dire financial circumstances. He went on to say that they had made plans together to move out of their foreclosed home and start a new life somewhere else. But things were not as they seemed. The shocking truth came to light by the prosecutors. He had hidden their financial struggles from his wife and tragically ended her life before she could ever learn the harsh reality. Rather than being honest with his wife and working together to find a solution, Nick resorted to the unthinkable. Prosecutors said Nick killed his wife because he was too ashamed to tell her about their money problems. This included $18,000 in credit card debt and 22 months of late mortgage payments. Prosecutors argued that he killed Heidi because he was too ashamed and afraid to face the reality of their situation. By ending her life, he saved himself from having to confront the consequences of his own deception. Yet even as justice was served, the pain and loss felt by Heidi's loved ones remained. No amount of legal retribution could undo the harm done or bring back the vibrant life that was so cruelly taken. No one could have imagined that the person Heidi trusted most would be the one to take her life, but that is exactly what happened in her tragic case. Story 6. Michael Haight was born on January 7, 1980 in Seattle, Washington. However, at an early age, his family relocated to Cedar City, Utah following the completion of his father's dental school. As a child, Michael was a typical young boy who enjoyed baseball, basketball, and soccer. He achieved the rank of Eagle Scout and excelled in school. After graduating high school in 1998, Michael spent the summer working at a fish plant in Alaska. He quickly earned the position of line manager, overseeing more than a dozen men. His work ethic and dedication were recognized, leading to his promotion. Michael went on a mission trip to South Brazil as a dedicated member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. This experience further deepened his faith and strengthened his commitment to his religious community. Upon his return to the United States, Michael pursued a degree in business at Southern Utah University, where he graduated in 2004. At Southern Utah University, Michael met his future wife, Tasha Earle. They fell in love and married in the St. George Temple on May 10, 2003. Michael appeared to be the epitome of a devoted husband and father to outsiders. He coached his children's sports teams, attended their school concerts, and spent time with them sledding and doing projects in the garage. However, on January 4, 2023, the facade Michael had built around his family came crashing down. On that day, 8 bodies were found in the Hyatt residence, leaving investigators and neighbors alike shocked and bewildered. Early that morning, Tasha Haight missed an online appointment, and Michael, her husband, failed to report for work. Their colleagues grew concerned and contacted the police to perform a welfare check at the Haight residence in Enoch. Officers arrived at the Haight residence, but upon knocking, they received no answer. As they walked around the property, the officers observed that it did not appear as if anyone was home. Knowing that the Haights had 5 children, the police contacted the Iron County School District to verify if any of the children were at school that day. However, it was discovered that none of the children were present. When the police arrived at the Haights' home, they cleared the premises to ensure no immediate danger was present. After a thorough search, they confirmed that no one needed medical attention and that there were no signs of an active threat. The Haights lived in a single-story residence with a basement. Detectives arrived on the scene a short time later after the home was declared a crime scene. Upon entering the main bedroom, the detectives noticed that the 4-year-old Gavin was laying flat on his stomach, his head turned to the left. One of his arms was placed under his head on a comfortable pillow, while a blanket covered a portion of his body. Similar to Gavin, Tasha was only partially covered by the blanket. The detectives discovered an older woman on the other side of the bed. She was later identified as Gail Earl, Tasha's mother. Gail was also lying on her back, her head resting on a pillow. Like her daughter and grandson, Gail was partially covered by a blanket. As the detectives continued their search of the Haights' home, they entered Briley's room, where they found the 12-year-old girl lying in bed. She was slightly inclined and partially covered with a blanket. In Eamon's room, the detectives discovered a 7-year-old boy lying face down in the corner of the room. Unlike his siblings, he did not have a pillow or blanket over him. Sienna, Eamon's twin sister, was found in her bedroom, lying on her left side in bed, her head resting on a pillow, also covered with a blanket. Macy, the eldest of the Haight children at 17 years old, was found in her bed, her head resting on a pillow, and her body covered by the blanket. The detectives then found Michael Haight in the exercise room in the basement of the home. He was lying on top of a sleeping bag. All 8 victims were found dead from a gunshot wound. It did not take long before the detectives concluded that Michael Haight was the primary suspect. They theorized that he killed his wife, mother-in-law, and 5 children before taking his own life. As the detectives began their investigation, one neighbor provided crucial information that helped them piece together the timeline of the crime. The neighbor told the police that she had awoken at 3:30 a.m. to use the bathroom. Exiting her room, she heard a loud bang that sounded like fireworks. However, she quickly noticed that it was past the legal date for fireworks to be allowed in the neighborhood, leaving her feeling annoyed. The neighbor continued, stating that after the initial bang, she heard 2 more in quick succession. This noise was followed by a short pause, followed by another bang. That pattern continued with a brief pause before the next bang, and a longer pause before a final bang. Based on the neighbor's statement and the condition of the 8 bodies found inside the house, the detective speculated that the bangs she had heard around 3:30 a.m. were directly related to the events that unfolded that night. They believe that Michael Haight carried out the brutal killings during this specific time frame. During the investigation into the Haight family murders, detectives learned that an unnamed non-family member had reported abuse to the police in the Utah Division of Child and Family Services in 2020. This individual revealed that Macy, who was 14 years old at the time, confided in them about her fear of her father. That revelation sparked a further investigation into the Haight household. Following receipt of the DCFS report, Macy and her parents were interviewed separately. During Macy's interview, the interviewer learned disturbing information. Macy stated that there were times when her father choked her, and she feared he was going to kill her. She revealed that the violent attacks began in 2017 and spoke of a time when her father grabbed her by the shoulders and pushed her into a wooden piece of furniture. When the detectives interviewed Michael Haight, he denied ever hurting his daughter. He dismissed the incidents described by Macy as misunderstandings and blamed his emotional state on his father's death and the recent divorce of his brother. Michael stated that he had been upset about these issues and took it out on his older daughter. Tasha did not want to press criminal charges against Michael, and the Utah Department of Children and Family Services, the Enoch Police Department, and the Iron County Prosecutor's Office also declined to press charges. They had determined that the case did not meet the statute's requirements for prosecution. Additionally, a lethality assessment was conducted with Tasha, and according to her response, it did not indicate her relationship with Michael was lethal. However, victim services were made available to Tasha and the children for several months after the case was open. Through conversations with Tasha's friends, the detectives gained a different perspective on Michael Haight from that portrayed to the community. According to Tasha's friends, whenever they stopped by the house to visit, they often had to engage in conversation while the water was running in the kitchen to cover up any sound. Tasha believed that Michael was monitoring her conversations and eavesdropping on them. These friends also helped Tasha clean the house whenever they came over, so Michael would have nothing to yell at Tasha about. Tasha's friends shared that whenever they texted her, she would respond with short, positive messages, seemingly mindful of the possibility that Michael might read these messages. They believed this was a way of maintaining a positive image in front of Michael, as to suggest that everything was going smoothly in their marriage. The detectives assigned to the case have learned that Michael exhibited signs of highly controlling behavior towards his wife Tasha. One way in which Michael exerted control over Tasha was by taking her car keys and phone to prevent her from leaving. Another incident that raised suspicion about Michael was his reaction to Tasha purchasing a $30 rug from Walmart to replace a soiled one. Although Tasha had a legitimate need for the carpet, Michael became furious, claiming the purchase was excessive. Tasha confided in her friends that her 7-year-old son, Eamon, was acting more and more like his father, Michael, emulating his bad behavior. Whenever Tasha told Eamon to do something, he responded, "That's not my job." This behavior was concerning for Tasha, as it reflected Eamon's lack of responsibility and disregard for authority. Michael often dismissed or ignored Tasha's instructions, and Eamon seemed to follow suit. According to Tasha's friends, in 2022, Tasha dared indulge in a small act of self-care. Despite the demands of her responsibilities, she decided to get her nails done, a relatively rare occurrence for her. However, her husband Michael did not allow it to happen, placing strict restrictions on her freedom. After Tasha's indulgence, she felt renewed confidence in beauty. She told Michael that she would be getting her nails done on a monthly basis, a decision that did not sit well with him. Angered by his wife's decision, Michael expressed his disapproval, questioning how much this new habit would cost. To alleviate Michael's concerns, Tasha calmly explained that maintaining this self-care ritual costs $25 per month. However, Michael remained unconvinced, arguing that Tasha was taking food from their children's mouths by spending money on her nails. His perspective was rooted in control and a deep financial responsibility towards their family. Around the same time, Tasha started prioritizing her self-care and began losing weight. After years of her husband calling her fat and ugly, Michael was furious that she was shedding pounds. He accused Tasha of cheating on him, trying to justify the sudden change in her physical appearance. Michael's controlling behavior reached new heights as he attempted to manipulate Tasha's weight loss. He pleaded with her to stop losing weight, concerned that other men might look at her with desire. Underlying this demand were his deep-seated insecurities and desire for complete control over his wife's body and behavior. Tasha's friends also told the police about when the family kitchen table unexpectedly broke, and Tasha needed to buy a new table. However, Michael refused to give her the money to buy one. Frustrated by the situation, Tasha decided to take matters into her own hands. She chose to refinish the old table, hoping to improve its appearance and functionality. However, this act of defiance did not sit well with Michael, as he did not give her permission to do so. Michael Haight had a stingy attitude towards spending during the holiday season. Despite his significant income, he provided only $100 to Tasha for each of their 5 children to buy presents. Tasha always gave her children a fulfilling Christmas, yet Michael received a substantial paycheck from his job at Allstate. However, he refused to allocate additional funds to his wife and children. His rationale was that he didn't see the need to provide them with more of what he believed was rightfully his. Michael's obsession with reducing waste and conserving resources led him to impose strict rules on Tasha's household habits. She had to wash out and reuse plastic bags, even if they were used once or multiple times. This excessive demand for reusing bags placed additional responsibilities and burdens on Tasha, leaving her feeling overwhelmed. Further, Michael's desire to control every aspect of Tasha's life extended to her cleaning and baby care routines. He insisted on having the cleaning and baby wipes, claiming it was more eco-friendly and cost-effective. However, this demand compromised Tasha's comfort and hygiene and created unnecessary stress. If Tasha failed to adhere to the instructions set by Michael, she faced serious consequences. He made it clear that disobedience would lead to a lot of trouble for her. This threat created a sense of fear and submission in Tasha, leaving her with no choice but to comply with Michael's demands. According to Tasha's friends, she confided in them that although Michael had been mean to her throughout their marriage, he had never extended this mistreatment to their children until the late 2010s. However, as time went on, the abuse directed towards Macy intensified, leading her to consider taking her own life. Michael had extremely high expectations for his daughter Macy. He expected her to earn straight A's all the time, even though Macy was already struggling with the weight of her father's abuse. The pressure to meet his unrealistic expectations proved to be overwhelming for Macy. Macy's friends told the detectives about another disturbing incident in the Haight home. Michael returned home one evening to find Macy with her head in her mother's lap. Angry and frustrated, Michael instructed Macy to get up and clean her room. This incident left Macy deeply shaken, as she recalled looking into her father's eyes and seeing them filled with hatred and pure evil. The detectives uncovered another incident where 7-year-old Briley was playing with a changing table and did not stop when Michael told her. This incident led to Michael blaming his wife, Tasha, for their children's behavior. He labeled them as the worst children in the world, who were disrespectful and awful. Michael not only blamed Tasha, but also called her fat and ugly, all in front of their 5 children. It was during this distressing incident that Tasha decided to pursue an exit strategy and file for divorce from Michael after 20 years of marriage. The incident, which showcased Michael's abusive behavior and lack of control over his anger, served as a wake-up call for Tasha. She saw the negative impact this behavior was having on her children and realized that staying in the marriage was not an option. Divorce was difficult for Tasha. She spent over 2 decades with Michael. However, she realized that her children's well-being and safety were more important than any marital bond. On December 21, 2022, Tasha filed for divorce from her husband Michael. However, she asked for the divorce papers to be delivered after the holidays, wanting one last normal Christmas for her 5 children before the separation. She knew that Michael's behavior would likely escalate once he received the papers, and she did not want the holiday festivities tarnished for everyone. The divorce papers were delivered to Michael's Allstate office 2 days after Christmas. Despite his recent actions, Michael called Tasha, acting completely normal, asking her about her day, as if she hadn't served him with divorce papers mere minutes ago. He told Tasha to leave, but insisted that she leave the children behind. But Tasha stood her ground and refused to leave the house without them. Despite Michael's demands, Tasha decided to take the children with her to her mother's home in Laverkin, Utah. Later that evening, Michael showed up at his mother-in-law's house, attempting to convince Tasha to go for a ride with him. Tasha, however, refused and confided in her friends that she had a bad feeling about going anywhere alone with Michael. After Tasha filed for divorce, Gail Earl, Tasha's mother, moved in to provide support for both Tasha and the children. However, Michael's actions during this time further exacerbated the situation. Michael did not vacate the family home. Instead, he chose to move into the basement where the fitness room was. In this room, he slept on a sleeping bag with a pillow on the floor, with his clothes hung on hangers piled on a couch outside the door. Tasha confided in her friends that she had noticed a discrepancy in their children's saving accounts, which contained $20,000. She discovered that Michael had secretly transferred the money out of these accounts without her knowledge or consent. Furthermore, Tasha inherited several firearms from her father after his death, including hunting rifles and a handgun. At the start of January 2023, Tasha discovered all the firearms were missing from her house. Upon further investigation, it was revealed that Michael had removed the weapons, leaving Tasha and her family vulnerable in case of an emergency. Michael and Tasha's oldest child, Macy, had expressed to several of her friends that she welcomed her parents' divorce. Macy confided that there would be peace without her father, Michael, in the home. She yearned for the tranquility that a divorce would bring. Furthermore, Macy had a secret phone that she hid in her room. According to one of her friends, Macy used this phone to record her father when he acted crazy. She confided in this friend that she was doing this to gather evidence to support her parents' divorce. However, Tasha found the phone and hid it away. Macy's younger sister, Briley, also endured a tumultuous home life. Due to the constant drama at home, Briley often sought refuge at her neighbor's house. This neighbor had grandchildren of a similar age, and Briley found solace in the company of these children. Briley disclosed to a friend that she was happy about her parents' impending divorce. She even mentioned purchasing some new books, but she refrained from telling her father out of fear that he might get angry with her. On January 3, 2023, Tasha met with her attorney to discuss her ongoing concerns about her divorce from her abusive husband, Michael. During their conversation, Tasha revealed that although Michael was still living in the family home, she was relieved that he had recently relocated to the basement. Given Michael's volatile behavior, the attorneys pressed Tasha on whether she ever experienced any concern for her or her children's safety. Despite Michael's occasional outbursts, Tasha reassured her attorneys that she never feared for her or her children's well-being. In hindsight, it is clear that Tasha's optimism and misplaced faith in her husband were tragically misplaced. The investigation into the Haight family's shooting was a harrowing journey for police detectives as they pieced together the chilling sequence of events that led to the tragic outcome. One chilling discovery stood out amid the digital evidence collected from the family's computers and cell phones. On December 30th, mere days before the deadly shooting, Michael conducted a disturbing Google search. At 10:41 p.m., Michael's queries delved into firearms and shooting-related topics. These searches and other evidence gathered during the investigation painted a chilling picture of Michael's intentions. The search results revealed alarming questions, such as, Michael expressed that he could not handle the situation for another day, and was determined to put an end to the manipulation and control he had been subjected to. Michael's note expressed deep frustration and desperation. He mentioned repeatedly asking for help, but no one seemed to listen. In this note, Michael emphasized his determination to not be a burden to society. The details of this case have left many in shock and disbelief, as it painted the picture of a deeply dysfunctional family plagued by violence. Michael's actions were premeditated and calculated. He carefully planned the murders, ensuring that his wife and children were unaware until it was too late.